1 second before we start. So called in, we're all good.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. This is the Alaska Marijuana Control Board. We are convening in Anchorage in the 3rd Judicial District. We're here in the Atwood building. We've got people on the line, people in the room. Anchorage, of course, is the homeland of the Dena'ina people, and we're pleased to be here. So, we'll call the meeting to order and get a roll call.
Mr. Springer?
Present.
Mr. Emmett?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. McConnell? Here. Ms. Milks? Here. And I'm Michael Milton.
All right, thank you. So we got a kind of a weighty agenda. He's coming to these meetings in shape, lifting these things up. So we, well, first of all, let's get a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, moved by Mr. Emmett, seconded by Mr. Miller. The chair would entertain a motion to move tab 14, which is on-site consumption endorsements, to time certain of 11:30 a.m. today for that item.
So motion.
Motion by Mr. Second?
Second.
Okay, second by Mr. Miller. For that amendment, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Jones? Aye. Okay, very good. So we'll take up on-site consumption 11:30. We'll also entertain a motion to move tabs 10 through 18 to essentially the end of the, with the exception of tab 14, to the end of the agenda. That's the rest of the regulations projects.
So motion.
Okay, there's
second.
Mr. Miller. All those in favor say aye. 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 Hear any opposed? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I've been informed that the licensee for the first two items under executive session, so 106 and 10067, is unavailable today, but will be available tomorrow. So may I suggest that those two items be moved to 9 o'clock tomorrow morning?
Sure.
So moved. Second. Aye.
Did we note for the record Mr. Ankerfeld is not here, and he'll be joining us at about 11:30. He's out of state.
You have just done so.
Yeah, okay, very good. All right, are there any other changes that anybody would like to the agenda? Can't think of any. Okay, so all those in favor of approval of the agenda as amended, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, very good. Board governance, Ms. Milks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the members of the board will declare to the board and to the public if they've had any changes in their business relationships, personal world that could potentially impact the Executive Branch Ethics Act, or if they've had any ex parte communications, that means communications with interested parties outside the context of the board meetings, will you please declare those things? Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Jones?
One change. In November, because of a vacancy in Juneau, I was elected to the board of directors for the Alaska Municipal League. So that adds a series of meetings. They're scheduled for their Juneau meeting at the same time the Marijuana Control Board is meeting in Juneau in February. So I will attend this meeting and not that one, but that is the one change to my status.
No change.
I haven't got any particular changes. I did, yesterday I got a text from somebody about the vote today, but I didn't reply to it, and so I'm not really considering it necessarily an ex parte communication. And that's that, so we are right on schedule. Testimony.
Can I approve the minutes?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yep. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the October meeting?
Yeah, motion to approve said minutes.
Second by Mr. Miller. Everybody had a chance to look at them? All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, very good. So now we're back on schedule. Okay, public testimony. We should have a list here, I hope. You have a list?
No, we stopped doing it because
Oh, really? Okay. Well, there's a couple of... Okay, so remember, please, public testimony is for items that are not on the agenda. If you want to talk about a license application, pardon me, if you're not the licensee, you want to make comment about something that is on the agenda, a license action, you'll have an opportunity when that comes up. One, two, three. Oh, ladies first.
Okay. I'll take it. What's my time limit? Okay. Unpack the problem. Here, a second. Pretty intense. Here's the problem. Oh, right. I'm sorry. I really should. Hi, my name is Sarah Williams, and I'm going to stand. This thing is definitely going to be able to handle it. So, this is a problem. I've seen you guys as part of this for 4 years. We've traveled this journey together, and we birthed an industry 4 years ago, and we're about to birth another one in the hemp industry, and I am the biggest cheerleader for the hemp industry, hence the green hair. The problem that we face right now is this, and this. And the cannabis industry that celebrates the earth and the plant and the green is polluting our planet and our roadways with all of this. This is just flower, my friends. This is joints. And there's more. You get my point. Okay, this is just, since March, consumption from my personal medical condition. For the past 2 years of my life, I have suffered from a progressing medical condition that every single day has worsened, and I have been tossed down the road by 6 different doctors who will not recognize cannabis as medicine. It has been exhausting. It has been hopeless. It has been mind-numbing. It has destroyed the life as I went through it. But in the love of Jesus Christ, I found my salvation. And with that, if it wasn't for that, I would have killed myself months ago. But here I sit, with all of this in front of me. On top of that, the labeling is not consistent across the board. And I do my best to point out to these establishments when I go to them and I say, hey guys, that's just not right, instead of coming to you and wasting notice of violation time. But we have a problem. So here's my solution. Never come with a problem without a solution. These 2 things right here are biodegradable hemp plastic. Okay? So biodegradable hemp plastic will biodegrade in 6 months to 10 years, depending on your environmental conditions. They are as child resistant any of the others, probably a little bit more. I tested it with my 5-year-old. He couldn't open it. These, however, are pretty simple. You just kind of squeeze a little stronger than normal, but here you go. So, currently, here's my suggestion. I wanted to come with prepared regulation language and, let's just require this. But I couldn't do that because I was wrapping Christmas presents last night for my son's class. So here's my suggestion. The Alaska cannabis industry is creating a sin by all of this packaging. I suggest that we require biodegradable hemp packaging plastic as soon as possible. In fact, we have a public health concern. We continue every single day to throw this into our landfills and whatever, right? So, biodegradable hemp packaging should be required because we need to save our planet instead of stop destroying it with all of this. This is just my consumption, so if you can only imagine if you add everyone in this room plus all of their consumers, what we're doing to our landfills. So thank you for your time, and I promise you in February I'll come with that written language, and that's it. Thank you for your time.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Yeah,
Hey, Sarah, thanks for bringing this to our attention. There's articles both in the literature and in the popular press recently about the damage that's being done to our oceans by microplastics. The cannabis industry is actually to blame for some of that. We have robust protections in place for child safety, but it's definitely concerning that one individual has that many pieces of plastic that they're throwing away every couple months. So my question is, how available are these biodegradable plastics? Is there a strong industry for these that it would be feasible to acquire for?
Absolutely. So
businesses?
I have already reached out to a company called Santa Packaging. They're prepared and ready to provide tubes and plastic, so flour only. So it would take some time to replace the packaging for concentrates and edibles and things like that. But for our tubes, we're already ready to go. So Santa Packaging is out of Colorado. They're ready. I have their contact information, and I'm ready to sell and get that ready. They're very price comparable, and these packages are also recyclable. So it's a win-win situation.
Well, thank you. Can I see one of those?
You can.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
All right, Mr. Kerrigan.
Thank you very much to the board for the opportunity to speak this morning. I just wanted to let the board know of a couple of things. Number one, that the AMIA is going to be starting to work on a medical committee with doctors who have approached us and asked for some level of ability to start to move the medical issue forward in the state of Alaska. And so I know what the status is now, but I just want to let you know that we've been approached and we're going to start to work on that as well. So just so you are kind of heads up. Also, I wanted to make mention of something that a number of people have mentioned to me, and that's the length of the disclaimer that has to be used on everything that goes along with any kind of marijuana advertising. You just need to line the tabs up the edge so they're straight, and then the dot's right in the middle. There you go. Anyway, and so the length of the disclaimer on a 30-second commercial is 17 seconds, and they don't. You don't get to do anything like you do with used car commercials where you talk at 100 miles an hour kind of a thing. And I think that there's a way to reduce that possibly and still maintain its effectiveness to make sure people are looking at the warnings and they're warned about the intoxicative effects and heavy equipment. But right now it just seems a little ponderous for those who are trying to buy advertising to be paying more for the disclaimer than they're paying for the actual advertising. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that there have been several mothers who have actually mentioned to me that they can't breastfeed their children while they're working because they can't bring them into a facility in any way, shape, or form. And since bartenders are allowed to do that, and there's no consumption allowed inside of those facilities, and I would like to just address this and make mention of the fact that it would be nice if there was some kind of a safe way that could be discerned so that these women and guys too, take care of their children. I was one of those stay-at-home fathers for a while myself, but who could maybe try and figure that dynamic out so that it's more for people with families as well.
Also, the other thing that I wanted to mention is earthquake allowances for enforcement. I don't know if anybody has addressed this yet or not, but I knew of several people who, when the earthquake hit, they were in mid-transit. And I don't know if there's been any direction given to enforcement for what happens when there's a natural disaster in Alaska, but Lord knows there's enough natural disasters in Alaska to, maybe make some kind of allowances and make sure enforcement understands what's going on when it happens, that they direction to enforcement so that that's not hung out to dry for people. Because I knew there were several people who were quite concerned actually because they were they were on their way to do a delivery and they got hung out in the middle of it. The last thing is I just wanted to let you know that I know that the CU1 banking people are making a presentation this morning, but the AMIA has also received that information and we're fully endorsed as far as that's concerned. We're totally behind the banking proposals they're making. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Gary.
Okay, thanks, Gary.
Line up. Tell us who you are.
My name is Valerie Nelson, for the record, and I am here under public testimony or persons to be heard to ask, when you make your agendas, if there's a possibility that they're going to be changed, that that there might be a footnote or something. I spent a lot of money to get up here again for this meeting, and I find that the item I came to address, which should have been today, is now put off until tomorrow. So for those of us that don't live in the general commuting area, it's kind of tough when these things happen. Thank you.
Nelson, anybody else for people to be heard? Public comment?
Can I add one?
Yeah.
It's going to remain the same.
For the call-in?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the regular wide open
But it's not changing
bridge.
over from we had yesterday.
No,
That was just for yesterday.
that was just for yesterday.
Yeah. All right. Holy cow, we're ahead of schedule. Okay, we're up to Credit Union 1 presentation. Mr. Martin, please come on up. And I think there should be like flowers strewn in front of you.
Like the scene from Gladiator.
Well, good morning. Thanks for inviting us out. I'm accompanied here with by my CEO, James Wildman. And so just wanted to deliver remarks on the banking program that we are developing. So we're excited to offer these financial services to the cannabis community in Alaska. And we know that the marijuana-related businesses have struggled without access to services, and they fear for their safety for too long. And that there's similar concerns with state officials that we've spoken to. So we're working tirelessly right now to bring financial services, a full suite of financial services to this community. And so the program, it's been in development for over a year. We've been working closely with respective businesses to develop a program that we feel will suit the unique market needs while meeting our strict regulatory requirements. Our program, it really relies heavily on sophisticated advanced software technologies to facilitate our robust compliance requirements, and with the goal of helping normalize banking services as much as possible to these businesses. Due to this, we're beta testing our program that we call our pilot program to ensure that it actually works and that all the fine print details are worked out before we hold information sessions to the community, to all the businesses that are interested. We aim to provide these information sessions as soon as possible and to evaluate our pilot program quickly so we can expand it to the entire community of business. To the marijuana-related businesses, we know that you guys needed services yesterday. No, you needed services 2 years ago in reality. We're building a program that will have, like I said, a near full suite of services that can help them run their businesses in a convenient way, and to allow them to transact more freely, just like other normal businesses can. We're looking to include checking, savings, bill pay, wire transfers, as well as ACH to include direct deposit for payroll, business transactions, and electronic payments for taxes. We're also working really hard to provide retail stores with a secure way to go cashless, secure way for cashless transactions. Just to say, we're excited about our program, and we do feel that it's groundbreaking in the marijuana financial services space. The program concept, it's been reviewed by our regulators, by our bond company, by our board of directors, and several people in the marijuana banking space in the lower 48, specifically in Washington State and Oregon, have said that they have never seen anything like it yet. And most people that have reviewed it that are familiar with financial services in this space have used the word incredible when they describe it. So we've worked really hard for a long period of time to develop it, working closely, like I said, with respected businesses and people in the industry. Servicing this industry is by far the most complex and specialized financial service in the United States today. It requires an extreme specialization, and it places a heavy compliance burden on the institution. We believe that we have a very special program, like I've said, that can service everyone from hemp to CBD to actual licensed businesses to the ancillary businesses, everyone that's struggling to get bank accounts, as well as facilitate, as I said, the compliance requirements both with the state and on the federal level. So as I previously said as well, that we are working tirelessly, very hard to deploy this as soon as we responsibly can to everybody. We'll be sending out an email newsletter every 2 to 3 weeks to keep everyone informed who's interested in this program as we roll it out. That's all I have right now, but thank you for your time and open to questions. We have a good amount of time, so if there's any questions, we can entertain those.
Yeah, Joseph, James, thanks for coming today. So a question that I have, and maybe some of my fellow board members too, is so how did you guys convince the federal government that you could pull this off? What are you guys different than these other financial institutions who haven't been able to get the Fed's blessing?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Brandon. That's one that we get a lot from news reporters and a lot of other people. It's actually not convincing the federal government. The federal government told all financial institutions in the United States that they could do this as long as they follow specific guidance released by FinCEN, which is in the U.S. Treasury Department. And there's about 8 pages of guidance that we have to follow. The problem with that guidance is it places an incredible burden on a financial institution, and for a long time, there is no way for a financial institution to feel like they could reasonably adhere to that guidance because it was so incredibly specific and so detailed. Financial institutions have limited information on the customers that they service. They see things as far as transactions. They don't see things like guaranteeing that minors aren't using or that consumption isn't happening on public lands, or there's all these core memo priorities we had to adhere to, plus on top of that, there are really specific reporting criteria that increases reporting requirements for the institution by 10 to 15-fold. And so when you look at labor costs and on top of that actual capability, most financial institutions just can't do it. They just internally, this is just not a place that we can do and we can do well. And so most institutions haven't done it, but there have been some pioneers in the industry. There is about 40 institutions that we're aware of that are doing this across the country, some type of limited program across the country. A lot of it in the past has been very manual, if you can imagine. There's a lot of Excel sheets, a lot of folders on people's network drives trying to track and monitor things like when licenses expire and keeping information. It's very arduous, very, very difficult to do, and it takes a lot of labor to do it. But there's been some pioneers in the space. Fortunately for us, there's also been technology providers that have seen the requirements, and they have developed technology to help facilitate these relationships, both with the business and with the federal government, to help things become more transparent and more efficient. And so we've been evaluating this, like I said, for a year to try to get into this space. Other institutions that we're aware of in Alaska have all but most of them, like I said, have come to a point where they didn't feel that they could actually do this effectively and reasonably well. And so we've identified these technology partners where we feel at this time we're in a place where we could provide a really fantastic service to the businesses in a way that, an effective way. I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you.
Other questions? Are you considering having loans, either business loans or mortgage loans, in your suite of services?
Hi, thanks. It's something that we're definitely looking at from that standpoint. So one of the main focal points first is establishing a way for these businesses to be able to transact like any other business. You know, the phrase, my hat's off to them for operating in cash. If you think about operating your own lives in cash for a minute, that seems almost impossible, and yet you have these complex businesses doing it today. So we are exploring lending and other, services down the road. We've had questions about the ability to get personal accounts or personal accounts again. We'll have that capability. We have that capability today for MRB employees. We don't discriminate based on where you work. So as long as the activity that happens in say, an employee's account is commensurate with what a normal employee account would look like, that totally works. Where you run into trouble sometimes is maybe owners of corporations and, some funds may be transacting that way. That's one of the reasons that we really had to build a software backbone for our systems so that we can monitor normal activity and transfers from business to personal to business. I mean, if you look at any other industry, there is that kind of transacting that happens and nobody is overly concerned about it. This industry is not in that space yet. So we've got a program that we've built with a couple of things in mind. Scalability for one, and that is scalability if we end up with a lot of customers, but also scalability if, say, the federal law changes and it opens up the possibility for others to do the banking, where we're not employing so many people that we would then have to, look at layoffs or reducing, cutting those kind of costs. So we're being very cognizant of that as well for the institution. And so it will, the lending phase and the other services and things like that, that'll be the next iterative phase down the road once we lock this down.
You guys are a state chartered credit union?
Yeah, correct. We're the only state chartered credit union in Alaska.
About how long have you been looking at entering this business sector?
The regulators first talked to us about it in 2016, and we started looking at it shortly after that. One of the things for us from a compliance standpoint, I'm telling this to the MRBs like you don't know, but the compliance piece of that puzzle it's very genuine and real. And it's real for us regardless of if we serve MRBs or not. So we had to make sure that our internal systems were ready to take on this level of complexity. And as Joseph mentioned, that's where a lot of institutions say we can't afford that or we don't want to devote the resources to that. We see it a little differently, so we are.
Now, when you say MRBs, you mean retail establishments?
No, retail.
What's MRB?
Any marijuana-related business.
Okay, marijuana-related business.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Any cannabis business, as Joseph referenced, right? So you have CBD,
cultivators,
you have, right. Yeah, the number we only know really is retail, and that's a significant number of cash on the streets. But I think we all know there's other businesses.
Well, the cultivators, are the ones who pay the taxes, so.
I think that's another unique aspect of our program is when I've talked to a lot of people in the financial services space in the lower that are doing marijuana-related services, you typically focus on licensees, actual marijuana businesses, because the regulations are very clear for those. There's state regulation that's very clear for those, and the licensing requirements are very straightforward. So you can tailor a very specific program around licensed marijuana companies. But you have a lot of other people on the periphery that cannot get accounts as well, like CBD and hemp and ancillary businesses and all these other folks. So we want to design a program that we can service everyone that has trouble gaining access to financial services. And so it took a little longer to kind of put a program like that together as well. And that's another reason why it's taking a little bit longer to deploy and test the program, because we're creating something that's holistic that can capture everyone that struggles with getting financial services in this space.
Because for us, that's what it's about. It's about providing that service to those who don't have it. So that's one of the main drivers for us in that sense.
Okay. We've got Rob Schmidt and Kelly Mazzy. Ms. A, I'm sorry. Ms. A are here. If you want to come up, if you got anything you want to add or any questions you might want to ask them in front of the crowd or comments you might want to make about what, your respective divisions and departments, how you view this, feel free. If you just want to sit in the back and listen, that's fine too.
Yeah, we come up.
You don't look like a lawyer.
Doesn't really matter. As long as it will.
Hi, I'm Rob Schmidt, Assistant Attorney General representing the Division of Banking and Securities. This is a matter of great professional interest.
Yeah, Rob, maybe you should, I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was connected, I'm sorry.
Just since my name was mentioned, my name's Rob Schmidt. I'm an Assistant Attorney General. I represent the Division of Banking and Securities, and this is just a matter of great professional interest. It's a significant issue in the state of Alaska. We've been over $400,000 a day, every day on average, of marijuana transactions, are apparently all done in cash, and so there's a lot of concern about this issue. So,
all right, thanks, Rob. So, anything else you wanna add? Leave a stack of business cards on the back table, or so you've got now. You said you're doing a pilot program. Yeah. How many accounts have you got going right now, and what do you view your timeline as being before you'll really be able to roll it out?
Sure. So we're finalizing the back office systems over the next few months, and we'll start onboarding. We have a handful of businesses. I think it's 6 that are for sure interested in doing the initial pilot. We try to choose businesses that are different in the industry currently so that we can learn about the industry and how that works. We'll make sure the reporting requirements, specifically that Joseph mentioned, the 8 priorities coming out of FinCEN, we'll have those lined out. The next phase will then be to add approximately 8 to 10 other businesses, possibly businesses that are connected to the original 6, but also other businesses. And we'll run that for a bit to make sure we haven't missed any other components. And then once we have the success of that, which we anticipate, then we would be prepared to start our onboarding businesses from there. So we're hoping for a really good handle on where the program's at by this summer, and have any kinks worked out by then, so that as we go into the next fall, we can start ramping up from there. The only other thing I would like to add, because one of the businesses that we talked to here recently did let me know there's quite a bit of misinformation out in the public space on fees and things like that. So we are working out the fee structure, but it's not as high as the rumors I've heard. And I will let you know we are looking at a fixed fee structure, not based on the amount of deposits, because the goal is to get the money into the system, not encourage businesses to keep money out of the system to save the percentage that they might get charged elsewhere. So if any of the businesses have questions around the fees, I think we'll have a good idea of the initial fee schedule here in a few months, because we're trying to do it based on size of business as well, with a few different tiers, and then also whether you're a direct licensee or an ancillarily connected business. So the numbers that were getting thrown around yesterday were pretty high, and we're not into charging more than we need to charge, other than to account for our risk and our labor and things like that. So if anybody has questions about that, please reach out to the credit union, myself, or Joseph. We're happy to answer those questions.
So you guys are probably not going to be threatening to foreclose on property owners because they've got a licensee inside of their property. Yeah. The heck. I don't know whether retailers use card machines or retail spaces.
Do you mean ATM machines?
No, not an ATM. No,
MasterCard or Visa?
Yeah. So
They don't.
Okay.
MasterCard and Visa don't allow those transactions on their rail.
Okay, and so like my Alaska USA debit card says Visa on it, so that would be
right.
That would be okay. You don't have a way of so you guys are still thinking about how to do cashless at retail.
As Joseph mentioned in the initial remarks, there is, we believe, a mechanism to make that work. It'll be part of the testing if there is a business that's interested in trying it out for their clients. The best way to describe it is it's PayPal-like in that you would load money onto a platform and then use that platform to code purchase authorization so that on a point-of-sale system at the MRB so that it could be cashless. We also understand a lot of individuals may still prefer to pay in cash, but we do want to try to provide a way for the cashless piece to happen as well.
Okay, great. Any other questions? No? All right, well, we appreciate your coming in, and usually the crowd claps, but I'll clap for you guys.
And thank you for
thanks
the
a lot,
work
gentlemen.
you guys do on the board as volunteers. It's fantastic.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Okay, did we check though? No, we did not. Okay, anybody that's on the phone, I apologize, we skipped you. If there's anybody out there that would like to do public testimony, 3 minutes for items that are not on the agenda. Are we... Unmute here. So if you want to give public testimony about we drop the, I heard a beep, I heard somebody punch it on. And just bear with us for the morning technology.
Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign. That entry is not valid. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign. That entry is not valid. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign. That entry is not valid. Your call could not be completed. Please try your call again later. The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will now end. Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign. Thank you. Please stand by. If you are the chairperson, press the star key now. Your conference will begin when the chairperson arrives. Please wait. You will now be placed into conference. There are 37 participants in the conference.
Okay, did everybody catch how many of those were? Okay, hey, this is Marijuana Control Board. We're back on the air. Hopefully everybody heard the presentation about from I apologize that during public comment we did not inquire of the radio audience. If you want, anybody has any public comment. So if anybody does, as most of you know, things that are not on the agenda, license applications, not regulations. So 3 minutes, and anybody would like to testify, jump in and tell us who you are. Going twice. Okay, I guess anybody out there wants to... Hello? Yeah, hello. Anybody who wants to testify, public comment. Okay, not hearing anybody, we're going to review the vote. Thanks very much.
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode. The conference is now in listen-only mode.
In the interest of time, because we have such a full agenda, I'm not going to walk through most of the items that I mentioned, although if the board has questions about any particular item, I'm happy to discuss it. But I did want to talk about the retest issue. I need some guidance from the board. 3 AAC 306-660 requires the approval of the director or the board to have a retest in the case of a failed test. The question is, what happens when a licensee who has had a passed test wishes to get a retest? I've had this request several times. I don't think the regulations contemplate multiple tests because then you also get back to the issue of which test is the accurate test, and you can get into potency shopping, and this is things that have been seen in the States. So the question for the board is, can somebody have a second test if they've had the first test that passed? How do we address that in metric? If the board says, yes, you can, how does that get addressed in metric? Which test is the real test? And how does the board wish to deal with this?
Does that come up at the testing committee?
I don't think this has been specifically addressed at the testing meeting. I think someone may have mentioned it a time or two, but it's not an item. So through the chair, the director, one of my a follow-up question would be, for this, we want to separate the issue of retesting flour from concentrates. So there might be different reasons why someone would want a retest for their flour, why someone who's using a solvent-based extraction might want a retest for their concentrate.
If their flour or concentrate has passed?
Yes.
I mean, that's, again, the regulations are silent on this issue, so if there are different reasons, I mean, the board needs to say that and give me direction on how to address these.
Yeah. So, may have a little more difficulty speaking to the flour issue because I'm not a cultivator, but I do know the concentrates manufacturing side quite well, and I know some concentrates manufacturers, myself included, may want to have a retest done, even if their original sample passes, if the residual solvents are above level that is desired by the consumer base, which is actually around 300 ppm. that's actually lower than the threshold. And so there's been times where a manufacturer would say, well, I've got this past test, and at least on concentrates, the potency is usually high regardless. So, but it tested at 790 ppm, and I know that there's going to be some difficulty in moving it at that high of a ppm, so they might want it retested so they could rebake it essentially and get that ppm lower down to that commercially desirable level, and then use that second test. I could see on the flour side if someone were wanting to, if they got one test that was done and it came out with really low terpenes, and they want to have another tested to see if that one might end up with higher terpenes or higher potency. I could see that, but I think you'd want like maybe an average the two when it comes to potency. It'd be tough to just say, okay, you can do multiple retests. I think if there's the ability to change the product and get a different result on the manufacturing side, a retest is pretty easy to say, yeah, that's okay. I think you'd need a pretty good reason for retesting past flour, though. They'd have to describe that. Are they just trying to get a higher potency or a higher terpene, or do they not think that that test was valid? I'm just trying to think of what could make someone want to get a second test on past flour versus past concentrates. Nick?
Well, we do have a limited cultivation, and to be quite honest with you, if the test passed, it is what it is. Sometimes you'll look at flour and think, man, I'm surprised, it was a good, things looked well, everything went well through the whole process. And so I agree with Brandon, if you're going to do something like concentrates and you're going to go back and reprocess it or change it in some way, you should be able to get a retest. But, I struggle with the flour thing as well. I mean, if it becomes a big issue, it's going to be more expensive, but I would support sending 2 different tests to 2 different labs and averaging the results. I don't know how we would do that, though, based on what I know about metric. So, maybe that is something more that could be discussed in the testing committee, but to be honest, I don't know a good reason to retest flour if it passed.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, good.
I guess flour, I would agree that testing flour is different than concentrates, but I guess I would not characterize it, if Mr. Emmett is correct, in that if you have a test, if you alter the product, you alter the test. I wouldn't consider that to be a retest. I guess some way metric would have to show that the particular product, batch or whatever, I'm not exactly sure because I haven't done metric, wouldn't be wasted, but in some way it could be recorded that this is a batch that won't go out to production. It's now changed because we did X, Y, Z to it, so it becomes batch X as opposed to batch Y. Maybe with the same number, just with, some additional. And then that batch is tested. So it's not a retest if you're going to change the product. And I think retesting is I don't know that I would necessarily support a retest unless the product is changed. Just simply because I think that's shopping and got enough problems with testing when we think it's valid, let alone if suddenly somebody comes in and says, your testing's all bad because you have 3 testings and I sent out 3 samples and I got 3 different results. I guess that's not comforting to me as something that the public would know, or maybe they do want to know because, within certain limits. But I think with concentrates or product change, we've talked about, cookie batch goes out and tests and, 3 of them don't show anything and 1 shows a lot, that means that the concentrate didn't get in the batter. Well, how do you do that? Well, you waste it and you try to do it better next time, but with concentrates, I would think there'd be something different. I wouldn't consider it a retest if it's a new product or a changed product, so, but I don't do that in metric either.
Yeah, James.
I'm sorry. We actually deal with this quite a bit in enforcement. The flour reasoning that a lot of people ask to retest flour, a lot of times it's because they are very familiar with the strain that they grow, and it has a very consistent THC content. And once they get it tested and it comes back sometimes 8% lower or higher, and they have some concerns over that strain because it consistently tested at a certain THC level. And say, for example, I had one call and say they had one that consistently tests between 19 and 22% THC. And they got a test back saying it came back at 14%. So they had some concerns, and they said that they knew, as growers, that nothing had changed from their process. So they were concerned about that test. And it might have been the flour that they picked, might have been some flour that was not prime flour, or if it was randomly selected. That's kind of the game of it, is if they're doing it correctly, they're going to pick flour that may not have as many trichomes and THC as allowed. Our current regulations have some sort of a fix for this, where if you have a strain that you have harvested within 3 months, you have to, on the label, it says that you have to put the range of what it tested from each batch. So that kind of takes away that average there if they have a consistent harvest of that certain strain. So if they have one strain that tested in October that was at, or the same strain that tested at 20, then another one at 21, then this one tested at 15, they would have to put this on the label range 15 to 21. So the consumer is that range is a little more accurate given the variables involved. So that's what I can say about flour.
I don't think that information goes to the consumer. I think it just goes to
on the label?
I think it goes to the retailer.
Okay, to the retailer. I apologize. On the testing packet, on the testing label to the retailer, so they know what they're getting. As for concentrates, I think Lauren hit the nail on the head. But our regulations don't allow for, I guess, what would be considered a pre-production batch. But I think that is a proper way to do things, because you have so many variables with concentrates and with batches where if you get stuck with one test and you're making 2,000 edibles and it fails, it's garbage. Whereas if you make a pre-production batch with the concentrate or the butter that you're getting, and you know how much concentrate that butter has, and you can use that in a formula to get the correct amount of THC in an edible, it's safer for the consumer. So I agree that there should be something put in place where we do allow for pre-production batches, and if you're not, it wouldn't be a retest if it's a different thing. It's just you trying to gauge what that formula would be for that THC that you put on the label or say that it should be.
Yeah, thanks, James. And to Lauren's question, so there's a way to do that in metric, and it does make some business owners and some lab technicians a little nervous. Like, say you get a test and it says you've got 799 ppm butane, and you know it's going to be really hard to sell unless you get it down to 300. You can take that entire batch, use all of the grams from that to make a new one and get that tested, and then that old batch all just went into the new one. And I think that the question and the hesitation from some people in the manufacturing industry, myself, is that something that if it happened often would be flagged? Would there be questions from enforcement? Is that something that we would have to notify the department and say, hey, we are closing out this batch and making an entirely new batch from that particular tag because we want to have this retested? Is that something that is not an issue? Is that something that could be an issue? Because it happens every now and then, but again, if this board gave the direction that that is an acceptable practice. We just want to make sure that both enforcement and the licensees are all on the same page.
I think it would be flagged because if you would need to notify us simply because if you made a large amount and then it all of a sudden went away and a new one came up in its place and we weren't aware of it, it would raise a question of where did this go. So I think Metric is pretty good at having notes and notating those types of things. I don't necessarily know if our current regulations support that, but that kind of goes into the pre-production batch, where if you create it and it's not what you expected it to be or want it to be, then you create another one or you do another process to it, which creates another item, and that item, there should be a tracking of that item within Metric all the way back. It doesn't create a new package and then it goes from there. It would still connect to that other package and describe what happened. But I do also want to point out that if licensees, cultivators, product manufacturers, otherwise, do this and it comes back failed for Aspergillus, E. coli, or something, we get stuck between a rock and a hard place. And if it passed initially and it failed a second time, I think the failure trumps the pass. And that only because that shows that type of thing, and that's kind of where we get stuck at. And if you understand the risks, also the rewards that are involved in doing that type of thing, I think that needs to be understood.
Yeah, and I think we're sort of talking about two different things here: flour and flour products. Okay, so the regulation says if a sample tested does not pass, that's 660. And then it says they can petition for a retest for any of those reasons, I guess including the THC was too low but everything else is good. But that means, that means it passed the test. And then 665 doesn't really apply here. So not having, consumed marijuana supposedly in this century, I've got a couple of people about that, but I really couldn't say what the experience quality is between 14% THC and 18% THC in flour. Okay. Now remember, we let cultivators do in-house quality testing, don't we? You can do that. I hope that when you have your in-house quality testing, your employees are taking copious notes, and that you are using those notes as part of your selling point to your retailers. You should have just as good a review to hand to your retailer as you would find in a trade publication for a particular strain. And if those, experience comments are good, then how much does a few points on the THC range mean? Apart, of course, from the point of pride that, I'm usually getting 20% from this strain, and why are they saying it's, 15? So I can understand that. There might be some economic issue there. So maybe we should allow, notwithstanding the risk of having some of your harvest sitting for a month or two and maybe getting, I won't say dirty, but it's sitting around. But maybe we should allow a voluntary retest for THC content, and say in the regulation that if there's a variance, then that has to be told to the retailer, and probably should be labeled. Some people are going to swallow hard about that and say, "Oh man, you're making my stuff maybe look bad," but it's a minimal difference in THC content. I don't think represents a public safety issue or a public health issue. The economic issue for the cultivator, and his retailer. But if you're giving them that range plus, a stack of feedback sheets from the, from your employees that have been testing it. And so that might trump that. So I think the way the regulation is written, you can only come in for a retest if there's a failure, and the failure is on contaminants and chemicals. It's not on THC content. So I think it's worth,
For flour.
For flour, yeah. I think it's worth thinking about, though. Like I say, allowing a voluntary retest, seeing if it can get put in a metric, and make sure that information is ultimately available to the consumer. That range is in there. This tested between, or it tested on the one test it tested here, and we're happy with that, and that's how we're selling it. So, but maybe should we put this on? You want to pick this up in the testing committee? You guys still meeting?
Yeah, we can take us on. The testing committee is ongoing. We've still got a lot of work to do as far as the actually getting all of the information from and to the labs. So we could take this one up as well.
Yeah, so maybe if you guys meet between now and February, we can pick this up in February. And that means there'll be plenty of opportunity for the industry to comment in the marijuana mailbox. So it's certainly something worth thinking about. Okay, Mr. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I request that you approve 3 forms. I apologize, these aren't on the agenda the way they normally are, but we're looking at Form 22A, 22B, and 25, sorry, not 15, 25. So 22A is a request to retest in the situation of a failed test. 22B is a request to transfer failed test material for extraction, and 25 is the waste disposal notice. Forms 22A and 22B have been in use for some time, but the recent regulatory change required the board, that came into effect late October, requires the board to approve these forms. Prior to that, there was no board approval.
Okay. 22A, say where the testing, it's got a test facility. It's in a report. It's down the end of a report.
Sorry, they're attached to my report.
Yeah, it's like page 9. Okay, so we've already been using a similar form here.
We've been using 22A and 22B.
Okay. Jones?
Thank you. In your memo, you say it's MJ15, but it's surely...
Yes, I apologize.
That's
it's
all
MJ25.
I would move that the board approve forms MJ22B, MJ22A, and MJ25.
Second.
All right, moved by Mr. Jones, seconded by Mr. Emmett. Any discussion on these forms? The 25, does that get sent electronically or mail it in, or how's that work?
So enforcement has been waiting to send an advisory to licensees after the regulations changed in October. We did not want to send a new form until it was approved by the board. We will now be sending the advisory with the form to all licensees. It will be made available on our website, and it also changes the email where waste is reported to, as our general email box is inundated with waste notifications. So I appreciate the board.
We have the wrong email on the form then. We'll have to fix that.
Does it say amco.enforcement?
Yeah.
Well, the new email would be marijuanawaste@alaska.gov. With that notation, would you guys still approve it? All right. So the new email will be placed on there, and we'll activate that new email and monitor it and send this out to all licensees. And as licensees send it to the general inbox, as they sometimes do, we'll direct them to the new email with the new form. And this will create a new consistent reporting for waste for us, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Just like to make one comment, being a retail store. At one point in the draft regulations, and I don't know why they disappeared, we had put some limits on how much you had to report before you destroyed it on this form. But I can tell you as a retailer, you need to expand this form to a second page. If I send it to you once a week, I'm going to fill it up because, right now, if I destroy a half a gram in a retail store, I have to put it on this form. And if you're carrying 30, 40 strains and concentrates and edibles, I got to be honest with you, you're going to get at least one of these a week, 3 pages long from us.
Yeah, that's fine. That's I think that's an editorial change, just making second page if necessary, and
yeah.
We'll send it with 2 pages or 3 pages, and you guys can choose to save it as 1 page if that's what it is. I would imagine that licensees could figure that out.
Yeah. It's a little frustrating when you have to destroy that much product, but now hopefully you guys are ready for all these forms.
And this is going to be downloadable on the website?
Yes.
Good. Okay, then all those in favor of the motion to approve these 3 forms, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those are approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just end by asking whether anyone has any other questions about my report.
I just had a comment about the management company agreements, and hopefully after the banking program rolls out, we'll see much less of these. I know a lot of companies make a management company that is actually themselves to run their business to try to get around the banking rules, and so I can understand when people are doing it like that. I would like to state, though, that I don't support a completely outside company running the business without being a licensee. I think that's in the spirit of our regulations, but if the people who are running the management company are the people who are the licensees, until we get solid banking, I think that we should leave that alone, because that's helping people do their commerce as they need.
Through the chair, Mr. Emmett, thank you for those comments. I bring this to the board's attention because we are starting to see outside companies, not a management company formed by the same people who are the licensees.
Mr. Chair.
Sir.
I share the comments on the management. Had experience in healthcare industry with, management groups that run hospitals for businesses, and a lot of rules around that in terms of liability related to billings and all that kind of thing. But ultimately, it falls to the hospital that hires the management firm, and you can get rid of the management firm, but unless you write a really tight contract, you don't have a lot of recourse back on them if they mess up in what they do and the policies and how they monitor employees. So I would stay away from them. But I think also in your memo you wanted us to approve a delegation memo for you to make minor changes to forms. Before we go skipping off this, I would so move.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. The chair already signed it. It's the kind of thing where...
Already signed it. Well, thank you, dictator.
The delegation's been made, so the form is just so the board can see whether I've expanded.
Well, it doesn't say here on that.
Yeah, it says it was adopted 5-0. I think you got to take a look at it, Lauren.
Well, I didn't look at the form. I just saw the thing. In her memo.
So you didn't hit this, but just the feel-good numbers for 2018 is $117,055,139, and the total retail sales since day one is $176,307,216. You should all write that in your hand, and when you're talking to somebody more important than us, wave your hand at them. Say, see, we're making money here. And the total taxes collected, not owed, collected for 2018 is $12,761,802. And the total...
I think that's owed.
That's collected? This is collected. $12,761,802. Yeah.
I'll change.
I said that's. I hope that's not owed. I hope that's paid up. And the total taxes from the inception is $19,076,575. Write that in your other hand. If you owe taxes, please pay them. I'd like to, at some point, if we could ask municipalities if they could let us know what they've been collecting in sales tax. And just doesn't have to be by community, because that sales tax information is kind of closely held. But if we can get an aggregate number statewide, we can see how this is benefiting municipalities as well. So that'd be a good number to get.
And so my comment would be for those individuals who wield more power than those sitting at the table. Although these numbers here look robust, we're leaving a lot of money on the table. The black market is still very strong. The legal industry struggles to keep up with the black market. Both businesses and enforcement just have not been able to extirpate the black market. It's very easy to acquire both marijuana and concentrates on the internet. And I would urge those individuals to really look at addressing the tax structure to be able to capture that revenue. Some estimates have quoted our industry to be about a $350 million industry, and we've only got about $117 million of it here. So please help us. Thank you.
Okay, then you got you do have a couple of resolutions there for us.
So the first one, yes, please, Mr. Chair. The first one is a resolution of appreciation for Sarah Dalton Oates. Sarah had worked at what was originally the ABC board and became AMCO for 7 years and was very instrumental in making a lot of positive changes to the office. And so the ABC board adopted this earlier this week, and I would ask that the Marijuana Control Board join me in appreciating her and adopt this resolution.
Okay, is there any opposition to the resolution? Okay, then it's adopted by unanimous consent.
Thank you, Sarah.
And so everybody probably knows she's now working for she's regulating alcoholic marijuana.
Moving on to
taxes.
to the next resolution. This was a resolution regarding separation of personal use and commercial marijuana. This was brought to the board at the last meeting, and Mr. Emmett had indicated that he had a concern about people who begin a limited cultivation facility on their property, that it may not always be in their dwelling, it may be in their outbuilding, and it was not the intent to consider those differently through this resolution, but I agree that the actual definitions would imply a difference. So I proposed this language and checked it in with him. There's a change under what the Marijuana Control Board would resolve under number 2 to add an outbuilding there. So I would ask for the board's adoption of this.
Yeah, I would move to adopt.
Okay, motion by Mr. Emmett. Second? Second. Seconded by Mr. Jones. Any discussion?
Thanks, Erica.
Okay. All those in favor of adopting resolution, we have a number right here. Resolution regarding separation of personal use marijuana and commercial marijuana. Say aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay, passes. Good. All right. We'll since we are right on schedule, we will move to enforcement briefing. Chief Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, board, members of the public, licensees. My name is James Holscher. I'm the enforcement supervisor for alcohol and marijuana control. I've provided to you my written report. I'm not going to bore you by rereading it. I will say that, the earthquake was very interesting. It brought back to our attention that we regulate 2 products that are stored in glass. So we were active that day after we got a little bit shaken up upstairs. After verifying our families were okay, we went back to work and we were out in the field throughout that day. And we were surprised to see, I don't know what it was, but man, there was a lot more traffic at marijuana businesses than normal. I think they were trying to calm their nerves. I stopped by, I think, at least 5 places, and just to see if their security cameras were working still, make sure that people were okay. Regardless of what may be said, enforcement's intention is to make sure everybody's safe, to try to make sure everybody's safe. That includes the licensees. And we want to show that we're out there, that we actually care about what we're doing and what the industry is doing. And I got to say that I am absolutely surprised by the response for the state of Alaska, the response of the people in Alaska, the lack of injury and everything else. I know this really isn't the time or place, but it still boggles my mind that we had an earthquake that large and nobody was killed. And if all we suffered was some product loss, so be it. It sounded like earlier there were some questions as to AMCO's response during disasters, and that's right. I mean, things usually don't, I guess, pop up into the forefront of your mind until it happens. And I guess we believed or assumed that licensees would do the right thing and proactive thing and report any losses or camera outages to us, which they did. A large majority did. They let us know of inventory loss. They let us know of injuries, of any security concerns, and how much product was lost and camera coverage lost. I still think it's important that when licensees have camera coverages or camera security, they should think about getting a battery backup where it at least runs a few hours on that supply, because if the power goes out and you're out, you're out. Whereas if you have something that at least keeps it on board, you're talking tens and thousands of dollars worth of electrical equipment. If you can protect it from power surges and you get to the point where it stays on because you have a battery backup, and then you can properly shut it down if the power's not going to come back on, that's only reassuring to the licensees. So I'd encourage everybody that doesn't have one to look into that. You guys see my stats. You guys see what we're writing. I know a lot of times it becomes redundant, but enforcement is pretty redundant. We do a job, we go out, we look for things, and so things get reported to us, and we investigate. Sometimes they come back as nothing. Sometimes they come back as concerns that we bring back to the board. There's very little interesting to our jobs other than we're trying to make sure that people are in compliance, licensees are in compliance with the laws, and alcohol and marijuana are not getting the hands of under 21. If everybody understands that that's our major concern, we're not out to get anybody. We're not actively focusing on anyone. If we do run into an issue where an investigation reveals that things were done incorrectly or improperly, we do investigate. That is our job. That is our job to report that to the board. So I just want to go on by saying I do appreciate the industry's openness. A large amount of licensees I've been accustomed to seeing and talking to, and they've been extremely friendly and extremely open, even when a mistake is made. And as you guys can see from the notices of violation, when a mistake is made and it's self-reported, a lot of times that's all it is. It's documented, and we ask the board to move forward and move on, and generally we don't see repeat offenses. Is there any questions for me?
Yeah, James, did on Earthquake Day, did anybody report any manifest issues? Somebody trying to come in from the valley and not be able to get down. What was that road that exploded? Or heading to the airport. Did you have any manifest issues that you saw or people reported? They had to redo them, they turned around?
No issues. I mean, they were on the ball. They did have to redo some of them. They did have to reschedule deliveries. I know a few people were at the airport and they had to reschedule going out. Most were gracious in notifying us about that and correcting their manifest. If they correct their manifest within metric, they don't even need to notify us if they just correct their manifest, and they can do that at the airport on their phone. I mean, I think that's very important for anybody to understand that you can correct a manifest until it's yours up until the other person signs for it. So if you're stuck in traffic, you can say delivery date or delivery time has changed due to high traffic. You can do that while you're sitting there. I don't encourage somebody texting and driving, but if you're stopped and you're not moving, that's a good way to do it, or a passenger can do it, vice versa. I know I didn't cover it in my report, but I also wanted the board to think about the new advertisement regulation that came out. I appreciate the industry's firmness in the last advisory I gave out about cell phone advertisements. There was, as it was written, it was very confusing. But I think we are very quick to remedy that, and I want to thank that Nick Miller and Eric on working with me on getting out the correct notice or the correct advisory on that. With that being said, when I was doing that, upon review of our regulation, it brings up a lot of questions about warnings and advertisements. You guys require somebody to state what type of business they are, yet in another area you say a warning is not required unless they state what kind of business they are. So it kind of contradicts itself, and it leaves enforcement, again, with a discretion that we don't feel comfortable with writing violations for, and that's why you have not seen them. So I would ask that you guys look at that, or maybe ask Erica to set up another committee to look at some of those before they become larger issues. Just fix the wording on the regulations so it flows smoother and it doesn't take up inadequate or inconvenient amount of enforcement's time dealing with small things like this.
Thanks. Hey, just a quick question on your stats. Are these year-to-date?
Correct.
Okay, so we've had 741 handler cards issued in 2018 through December 10th. I guess. I mean, this is alcohol, marijuana.
1,741, correct.
Yeah.
That's not total we have. If you would like.
No, that's not total.
Yes.
That'll be in the license report, but that's what has gone on year to date. So.
Correct.
All right. Obviously, a lot of people interested in working in the industry.
And as you guys know, enforcement did increase the hours to 3 times a week, from 2 times a week, from 1 time a week. Has anybody in the industry or reported to you guys that is an inadequate amount of time, or do they feel like that within that 3 days they can get their handler cards?
I haven't heard any complaints about the handler.
Thank you.
And you got some new space up there. You didn't really mention. You got nice new offices up there, and plenty more room, and a really big sign when you get out of the elevator. It tells you where to go. It tells you where the office is. Doesn't tell you where to go.
I'm open for any questions on stats if you guys have them there. If you guys want to see the transition from the last meeting to this meeting, it was asked at the alcohol board. I would just say, if you want to see the difference from the last time, just take our last meeting, practice from that, and you see how many inspections we got. As you can see, the rural inspections go down this time of year just because travel out to rural areas is pretty tough. We still do them for marijuana and alcohol when needed, and initial inspections are needed, so, but rarely do we just go out this time of year just to go out.
Well, according to some of our small cultivate licensees, you'd probably get lost in the winter trying to find them anyway, so better to stay on the paved roads. Okay, any other questions for James?
Yeah, just a comment. So James, I do want to thank you and your officers for your ready response during the earthquake. As a former emergency responder, I know what it is to check to make sure your family's all right and then get to work. And so it's appreciated. I think you guys did do a stellar job. I know it wasn't easy trying to put everything back together. Yeah. And I just want to say I noticed it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you want to move on to get anything to say on P&C here?
So on B, this is the notices of violation issued and licensee responses. I don't know if, then the advisory notices that have been sent out are included. I don't know if the board has any questions. I have nothing to add.
I just want to point out the top NOVs are not responded to by the licensee, and as directed by the board in the past, you guys wanted to see responses, but the responses are not there on these NOVs. So it kind of leaves us hanging where there was a violation, in some cases pretty serious ones, and they have not been addressed by the licensee. So I wanted to point those out to the board.
questions or comments on those two in particular? Well, wait a second.
Actually, a question. So do we have a time frame for a response? The required time to respond?
We had a discussion about this sometime last year. So the regulation at 306-805D says, a marijuana establishment that receives a notice of violation may respond to the notice orally or in writing. We felt that that meant that they have to respond, but they may respond orally or may respond in writing. The board, however, interpreted that to say that they don't have to respond. The board declined to open a regulations project to require a response, but instead urged licensees to respond. And there are changes to this section proposed in the fine schedule regulation that will be brought back to the board in February.
You said two of them, didn't I? I only see one from the cultivator that doesn't have a response. The next two, the manufacturer and the retailer, both have responses.
Okay, they must have corrected that by making a response.
But the one
I asked Jason to put the ones that did not respond on the top for you guys.
Got one that doesn't have a response yet. Good. And nothing else you need to bring to our attention, okay?
Unless the board has questions regarding them.
No, I think so. Tab 7.
Tab 7 was brought to the board, so these are civil fines requested relating to ACDC. This was brought to the board at the last meeting, and the board decided to postpone to this meeting. I can review the situation, but it's all laid out in the memo. Basically, this is your black market marijuana, that you have a company that's not licensed that is selling marijuana through a delivery service, and we would request that the board assess multiple fines. Some of the fines are requested against drivers who have sold to undercover either APD officers or AMCO confidential informants, and also a larger fine against the three individuals, or against the company that's registered with the state as owned by three individuals, and then asking the board to revoke the handler permit of one of the individuals.
Mr. Chair, although I wouldn't support the fines against the street level dealers, I think it may be just one, difficult to extract those fines, and those level of dealers are often just replaced. I would support a very stiff penalty for the organizers of this operation. This is something that is plaguing our legal industry. People have had years to convert from the black market to the legal market. That was one of the biggest arguments during the campaign, was that the marijuana businesses want to become legitimized, and I think ACDC spits in the face of not only the legal industry, but all of the work that this state has done by continuing to run a black market operation and advertising like a legal business. They're playing both sides of the coin. They're bad actors, and honestly, I think they should go away. So I would definitely support the fines and the revocation of the handler card for those individuals at the top of the organization.
Through the chair, Mr. Emmett, if I could just say a little bit why we are proposing a fine against the drivers. Like you say, they'll just be replaced if there's no. So the gentleman who began this organization has been he's had charges filed against him. He's going to have a trial, and yet the business continues. He's not stopping. If he can't find drivers to work for him, because the drivers know that if they start working, they're going to get fined by the board, that's an incentive to not work for this company, and that will help shut the company down, because clearly charging the owner hasn't shut the company down. That was why this is proposed. And of course, it is up to the board, but I just wanted to explain that.
Yeah, through the chair, Madam Director, I do understand that. I could go on a long diatribe about my reasons for the way we should fight the drug war. I'm not going to vehemently oppose fines for those lower level individuals. Just saying, for the record, I don't support it. But if it were a thumbs up or thumbs down for the entire thing, so far as the board is considered, I would support it as written.
Okay, yes, can we unmute the phone real quick?
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode.
Okay, and so we are just talking about you, our Senator Rodriguez, Stephen Trimble, Benjamin Lawson, Grant Emmett, Anthony Bradford, or Jeffrey Toole on the line. Representation. I get was any yes?
Can't hear well.
Can you hear me now? Okay, this is the Marijuana Control Board. We are discussing civil violations by Absolutely Chronic Delivery Company, and we are looking for the following individuals if you're online. Senator Rodriguez, Stephen Timblin, Benjamin Gerald Lawson, Grant Memmott, Anthony Bradford, and Jeffrey Toole. Are you, any of you on the line, or is there any representation for you? Okay, I'm not hearing anybody, those 6 people from ACDC. Yeah, I can hear somebody in the background. Okay, we will continue then. Let's go ahead and put that on mute.
The conference is now in listen-only mode.
So, do we have a, we could do this in a couple of different pieces. We could start with the low-hanging fruit, which would be a handler permit revocation. So if we want to do this take this in some chunks, it'll give us a chance to amend maybe some of these fines.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. I would move that the board approve the request to revoke the handler permit issued to Anthony Bradford, number 11980, in accordance with 3 AAC 306.812 for selling marijuana without a license.
Okay, there a second? Second. Seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion on this? And Mr. Bradford is one of the owners, listed owners of ACDC. Okay, we'll just roll call it on the motion. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Emmett?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that handler permit is revoked.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So I would move to approve the director's request that the board impose a civil fine of $300,000 on Absolutely Chronic Delivery Company, LLC, owned by Grant Memmott, Anthony Bradford, and Jeffrey Toole, in accordance with 3 AAC 306.840A for violating AS 17.38.070A by selling marijuana without a current valid registration.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Miller. And we still don't have a fine schedule, do we? So this is basically a discretionary amount. Am I correct?
Mr. Chair, what is in the regulations is that the board can assess a civil fine that is not to exceed the greater of an amount that is 3 times the monetary gain realized by the marijuana establishment licensee or person as a result of the violation as determined by the board, $10,000 for the first violation, $30,000 for the second violation, or $1,000 for the third or subsequent violation. I feel confident that the board could conclude that the ACDC has made more than $100,000, and this would be 3 times that.
Okay, very good. Any discussion on this fine? Do we have any expectation to collect? Okay, you're pointing at something pertinent there.
Ms. Milks points out that I was reading B, which has to do with an accusation. A allows the board to impose any civil fine you deem appropriate.
Okay, and what'll be the process for? Are we going to we just gonna serve them with a notice that they're being fined this amount? There's no judicial component yet.
Yeah, that's the process.
All right. Okay, very good. you guys ready to vote? All right, Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Emmett?
Yes.
And I'm voting yes, so that fine of $300,000 on Absolutely Chronic Delivery Company is upheld. Brings us to the individuals here.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I would move that the board accept the recommendation of staff to impose a civil fine of $10,000 on Zanita Rodriguez, Steve Timblin, Benjamin Gerald Lawson. And these fines are in accordance with 3 AC 306-840A for violating 173807-0A by selling marijuana without a current valid registration.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Emmett. Any discussion on this?
Mr. Chair, I would motion to amend the motion that the civil fine be $10,000 with $7,500 suspended.
There's a motion to make the fines $10,000 with $7,500 suspended. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on that?
I'm not going to support the amendment. I think the fine, and given that they know that their bosses are court and have been served with basically criminal offenses, and they're still operating, I don't see any reason to reduce the fine.
So again, I think the $10,000 for a fine for individuals who are most likely living at or below the poverty level is just going to be too much of a burden to bear. $2,500 would probably be just as stiff for these individuals as $300,000 for a business owner. And I think if you punish low-level criminals too harshly, their level of recidivism actually rises. Again, I'm not gonna put a lot of weight in this one if the amendment fails, but that is my amendment. I would urge you to support it.
Yeah, I understand your thinking there. I also understand Mr. Jones's. I wouldn't necessarily object to a $5,000 fine. $10,000 with $5,000 suspended. It's going to be, again, looking at the perspective of collecting $5,000 that theoretically is just 2 dividend checks. So I think that we, ACDC, are they still operating? Do we know? Yeah, they've been at it for a while. Your characterization of them spitting in the face of this whole process, I think, is perfectly correct. None of these 3 individuals have handler cards, do they?
No.
Okay, so this is by setting a hefty fine here. It represents sanction by the state for a violation that they really wouldn't get anywhere else. If we weren't doing this, the troopers wouldn't be doing it. APD wouldn't be doing it. No cops in the valley, is there? Silva Palmer PD wouldn't be doing it. So I don't know whether 2,500 is strong enough. Like I say, it's certainly entertain going down to 5.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So with the approval of the seconder, I would amend my amendment to the motion to be 5,000 and 5,000.
And 10,000 with 5,000.
Excuse me, yeah, 10,000 with 5,000 suspended.
I'll approve that for discussion.
Okay, and when a legal question, when there's a suspension to a fine, is there a mechanism that if they don't pay the suspended amount, that they're liable for the full amount?
Theoretically, yes. The full amount is actually what's assessed, but of course the devil's in the details, and
you'll take care of those.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded for 5,000. Mr. Jones, how does that sit with you?
No.
Fair enough. Okay, are we ready to vote then?
No.
We're not ready to vote, okay.
I would like to say, you know, for better or worse, I know someone who actually got hired as a driver. And, they were so excited about it, they didn't have a handler's card, they didn't realize they needed one, and, you know, most of these folks are making $10-12 an hour. They believe what they're doing is legal because the business owners are, telling them it's legal and showing them handler's cards and other things. And, you know, I feel like $2,500 is going to be life-changing for some of these folks for a year, you know, so I'm still stuck on the $2,500, and, you know, I would support that. 7,500 suspended. I still think 5,000 is just as bad as 10. I think 2,500 is going to be a tough burden for these folks to bear. So, I would support that. So.
Yeah, well, I have to say, think about some of my hospital bills from my toothache. I can sympathize with that. Okay, well, let's on the 5,005. Mr. Jones?
No.
Mr. Stewart?
No.
Okay, good Lord. Emmett?
No.
Okay, and I'll vote no, so it's not 5,000, so we are back to the original motion of $10,000.
I amended
Yeah, he amended it, yeah.
the motion, yeah, so to do that, I don't think I can make the same motion again. Someone else would have to, like Mr. Miller, if you want to make it 2,500, and you would have to make that motion. Again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think I can make that same motion again, right?
What's the main motion on the floor? Is it the 10,000 straight? We have a main motion? Good.
I made it 10,000.
Yes, the main motion is the 10. The secondary was the 25, and then the 5 and 5.
Okay. We're practicing for 11:30 here. Okay, so the main motion is for a $10,000 fine. Since there are only 4 of us here, remember that a tie fails. And if it fails, then we can't come up with another motion. So, is there another amendment to the? And you could vote to amend it again. You can move to amend it.
I can move to make the same motion that I did again.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if that was allowed or not, but okay. So I will move to make the same original amendment to the motion that we impose a civil fine of $10,000 with $7,500.
Okay, is there a second? Okay. Is there any more discussion on that amendment? Okay, not seeing any. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
No.
Mr. Emmett?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So they have a $10,000 fine with $2,500 suspended and $7,500 suspended, and the devilish details will be worked out. That the $10,000 is the assessment, and if they don't pay the $2,500, then they owe us $10,000. All right, very good.
That was the we haven't voted on the main motion as amended.
Oh yeah, we just voted on the amendment. Yes, now we're going to vote on the main motion. Yeah, as amended.
You're
right.
saying it's approved and it hasn't been yet.
You're right. Okay, so the main motion now is to assess a $10,000 fine with $7,500 suspended as amended. $10,000 as amended for $7,500 suspended. You've got all that, I know. Okay, does everybody understand the main motion? All right. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
No.
Mr. Emmett?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So now everything I just said is correct. All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Before you move on, if I may, I want to thank the board for doing that. That was a lot of hard work for the Anchorage Police Department and AMCO enforcement. And I want to let the board know and licensees know that AMCO enforcement is your primary, I would say, I don't want to say tool, but your primary way to helping with the black market getting omitted, at least little by little. And as you guys know, black market marijuana has been around for a long time. It's probably going to be around continually. But what we can do is try to stop the people that are trying to act in the capacity as a licensee, and can only do that when we have the cooperation of individuals, of licensees that are making these reports. I know it feels like a lot of slow going, just like this was, but we do come to some sort of resolution as the board has today. And I just would ask that the board and licensees and the people support AMCO enforcement by providing us tools, equipment, and the support to continue to do these things. So I just wanted to keep that fresh in you guys' mind, and I appreciate that.
Right, thank you. And I know this was a lot of work for you guys, and appreciate that too.
Yeah, James, you definitely got my full support when it comes to getting rid of these black market actors. Like I said, people had a chance to transition, and if they haven't, they're no friend of the industry.
Okay, just like that, we're at the licensing report. And I think after the licensing report, we'll probably take a break till 11:30.
All right, I just wanted to inform the board about our new staff members that we've added. We've added a new administrative assistant 1, Ms. Jennifer Dufresne, and she's currently working on alcohol permit applications. Mr. Church, our new occupational licensing examiner, is currently working on alcohol renewal applications. At this time, Jane Sawyer and Jacqueline continue to process marijuana applications exclusively, while Mr. Zielinski is currently splitting his time between alcohol and marijuana. Not going to go over the alcohol renewals right now due to time. I do just want to point to my statistics that are in my report. We have had significant, to me, reductions in the amount of time that licenses are waiting in the queue for marijuana. The average time from queue to seat is now 177 days, down from 196. And for the new applications, it's down to 95 days from going into the queue to be determined complete by our office. And I would like to say that as of when I wrote the report, our to-be-reviewed queue for marijuana has been reduced to 29 applications waiting for review, which is a substantial reduction, and I just wanted to thank our team for how great they're doing on that and all of their work. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I believe that summarizes my report.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, this is a good report, and thinking about it now, I think this is probably the first meeting we've had where during public comment nobody was griping about holdups on license applications. So, thank you. Any questions or comments for Michael? Yeah, and if you haven't downloaded a copy of this license report, go ahead. It's got the it shows how these are this one here. These are licenses. Yeah, these are licenses applications we've got for this meeting. That shows the
yes, the table of applications timeline is for licenses that are originally being brought to this meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got we've got a total of 261 operating licenses, so 170 million divided by that. That might do $700,000 each. No, not everybody's making that much, but certainly getting spread around. So, okay, any questions?
A bit more of an exponential scale. I think most people are struggling, and then there's a few that are making a ton of money. If it was spread out like that, everyone would be pretty happy.
Yeah, that's right.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to bring up something as long as we're talking about licenses. Juneau, I don't know about other communities, I don't understand Anchorage's process, but maybe Mr. Miller does better. But in Juneau, when we formed a committee to look at what we in Juneau would do in terms of licensing, we approved and we require every marijuana business to have a local license, so that we've had trouble with people not paying sales tax, and we had no way to remove their business because they were licensed by the state division of business. They get a business license and they could operate. So we put in that we would take away a local license. Excuse me. As of last Thursday, our community development reported that 19 marijuana businesses in Juneau had not put in their renewal application for their local license or requested their annual inspection and review. So it was brought to my attention that if that didn't change, the AMCO board would be notified January 1 that there were 19 businesses in Juneau that we were not going to allow them to operate. I want to report that CDD had sent out emails, had sent out letters, had made phone calls, all before I was told that there were still 19. So our compliance officer went out, knocked on doors, and as of an email yesterday morning, we only had 2 that had not applied for their inspections, and they were trying to reach those individuals. So I would remind people that I don't know how they are in their communities, but those operating in Juneau need to also be aware that Juneau and local communities often have requirements that they need to pay attention to. So hopefully we won't have any issue, but it might be something that we need to look at if, and I had questioned this when Municipality of Anchorage has suspended a provider for 30 days. And it was a grow operation, so it was sort of suspended in place. But if they had suspended the license of a retailer for 30 days, what would have been AMCO's response? If Juneau had come and said, you know, we have 10 licensees that we're shutting down, you know, that's a burden on AMCO. I understand that. So maybe something that licensing or we need to look at is if a local community does that, what ends up to be our response. Luckily, I think in Juneau it's all going to get taken care of. But to be this late when staff are taking off for holidays and stuff like that, it puts a burden on it. So I just as just a comment under licensing that this had taken place, and I think we need to be aware that, and the industry needs to be aware that oftentimes there are local rules and they can't be ignored either. So, thanks.
Okay, very good. Any other comments on the licensing report? Okay. All right, thank you. That was a good report. It's actually not quite 11. Do we want to try to get through a couple of regulation changes? I mean, we've got a couple that are, I won't say innocuous, but if they take 15 minutes for a couple of them, I'd be really surprised. I think we can probably do, pardon me, we can do local government protest, which is tab 11, and we probably do university license, which is tab 12. Does that sound right, everybody, just to get it knocked out of the way?
The tab 11 and tab 12.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, these others, they're just putting them out for comment.
Those are just for comment.
The 11th, 10,
yeah, you're right.
10 through 13 are just for going out for comment.
Okay. Like 5 minutes to the end of the meeting anyway. You only have one for action then, don't we? No? What else do we get for action?
We have
sample jars.
Tab 9.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, okay. So sample jars, handler permit, operating plan, and inspection parameters. We want to try to do a couple of those right now. Well, we can do 10 through 13 and send them out, yeah. Yeah, let's do that. 10 through 13 are just for public comment. Let's do that. Let's go to tab 10, which is license fees. I think that was I think we've discussed that a little bit. It's a kind of revenue motion on tab 13 for license fee regulation project.
Tab 10 or tab 13?
10.
Madam Chair, I would motion to put tab 10 regulation to increase fees out to public comment.
There's a second, okay. And that, just for the record, that's amending 3 AAC 306-100D. So that increases a new retail license, a renewal to $7,000, renewal for a limited cultivation at $2,000, for a standard cultivation $7,000, concentrate facility $2,000, product manufacturing facility $7,000, and testing facility $2,000. Those are renewals, not the original license. That hasn't changed.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So I want to put on the record for the benefit of the public and the industry knowledge why I support this. I've spoken against the industry incurring costs multiple times in the past, but I believe that this is a cost that would translate to direct benefit. There have been multiple licensees over the course of the last year that had stated they would be willing to pay more in licensing fees if it meant that those would be translated to faster turnaround times. So I think this is something that the industry would do good to support.
Okay, any other debate? Okay, and all those in favor of sending out amendment to 3AC 306 out to public comment, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, very good. Is that going out? Tab 11 is amending 3AC 306-060, and that's local government protests. Is there a motion on this one? Send out public comment.
Mr. Chair, I know there's not a motion, but the board hasn't seen this language, so I offered to give a brief explanation.
Go ahead. Yeah, you bet.
So right now, the regulatory language says if there's a protest and the board doesn't determine the protest to be arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable, the board must uphold the protest and deny the license. But as you know and have actually done, I'm sure by accident a couple of times, there have been protests and you have approved with delegation, just the delegation being the resolution of the protest. I've been bringing these back to say, no, if there's a protest, you have to deny it, but then you give them an abeyance period, and it gets very unnecessarily complicated because when the protest relates to a local government requirement that is like, get a certificate of occupancy, it's something that's going to happen. It's not that the local government is saying, we have a fundamental objection to the issuance of this license. The local government is just saying, we need them to do these other steps. So we've sort of separated a protest into something we call a conditional protest, which is we protest until the licensee or applicant meets these conditions. And in those situations, it's totally reasonable for the board to be able to approve with delegation, and the lifting of the protest can be part of the delegation. It makes the process easier. And then if it's not a conditional protest, then the board would have to either deny the license or determine the protest to be arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. So again, I think this will make a smoother process. It will not put a timeline on the licensee or applicant, whatever you call them at this point, for getting that protest lifted. As you know, I do bring people back to the board if they've been in delegated status for a long time, so the board already has an opportunity to review that. So I think this will make it easier for the board and the applicants.
All right, thank you. So do we have a motion on this regulation change, proposed regulation change?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Motion to put out for public comment the regulations change contained in 3 AAC 36.060A.
Second. Okay, second by Mr. Miller. Mr. Jones, do you have a comment on this, or?
I just would suggest that because local governments don't act quickly, even on protests or resolving protests, that this be put out for at least 60 days to allow local governments to work through their process to make sure that their comments go through their appropriate assembly or whatever committees they have to do. 30-day comment period for governments is way too short.
That's, yeah, that sounds all right. We have the wherewithal to put a 60-day comment period.
Yes, and I will also say we will send this directly to all of our local government contacts to let them know. Certainly, if it was adopted, we would be working with them to help them change their process to identify whether it was a conditional protest or not.
Yeah, and send it over to AML, too. Okay, any other debate on this one? Right, all those in favor of sending 3AC through a 6060A out for public comment for 60 days, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's going out. Good. The next would be, University of Alaska. And this was my bright idea, and this would allow the university to get a license for a cultivate, manufacture, and a testing facility. We don't have retail in here, right?
Mr. Chair, as written, it doesn't limit them from getting a retail license, although I don't recall that being mentioned. So we could amend it to make that change should you wish. It does try to treat a public or private university similar to a local government. It states that the main campus of the university has to be located in the state. And one of the things that I would point out is that the members of the governing board would be the licensees that have to go through our fingerprinting process, but they would designate a responsible official, and that person would not, as drafted, have to go through the fingerprinting process. That appears to be the way a local government license is sort of arranged in here, and I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. I think when I brought this up, the reason maybe there's obvious reasons I didn't suggest that the university have a retail, but knowing the Board of Regents, they might say, oh yeah, we can make some money on this. And it would make an interesting MBA project. But the question that comes to mind is, believe that a retail has got to be, at least a retail has got to be so far away from the university campus. I think, as I recall, that's a long time ago since we wrote the regulations. But does that apply to a cultivate or wouldn't apply to a testing lab? Do we have any conflict there?
Those distances apply to all licensees.
Yeah, so they actually, if the university is going to do some of this, might have to do it off-site.
The question is the university a school ground? And I don't know if the board has
I think it is. I think when we did that at least for retails they got to be. I thought we had the university mentioned here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So if this were ultimately approved, I think the cleanest way to do it would be to amend our setback distances as well and create a carve-out specifically for universities. Thinking of the UAF campus, I would see any activity would be happening on the hill. That's where they have all the greenhouses. That's where they have the biochemistry lab. That's where they have the pub.
So I thought the intent of this was really to possibly get testing.
Yeah, it is.
And maybe I would be more comfortable limiting it to a testing license. I'm not positive I would encourage you to get a cultivate and a retail and a manufacturing license.
Well, I think the intent with and again, when I brought this up, I wasn't thinking of retail at all. I was thinking cultivate so that they can work on science, right? Work on plant science, and create an academic body of knowledge about Alaska cannabis cultivation that doesn't exist right now. And manufacturing, again, to develop a body of knowledge on the manufacturer, both refining, I'm sure there's petroleum engineers that would like to try their hand, and making edibles. And again, getting some body of knowledge, and who knows, you might get the cooperative extension service writing pamphlets. But on the testing side, also, they've been involved in the testing committee, and we want to try to start to develop that body of knowledge here within the state that's applicable to what's going on. So I think this will vet itself out. And the university might come and say, "Are you guys crazy?" They might not like the idea at all, or they might love it. So this is fine with me the way it is.
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is just to put this out to public comment. This won't. I would be shocked if this were the final draft of this. But so I would motion to put out for public comment the change contained within 3 AAC 306.015A.
Before we put it out, would you like us to add a clarification that they are not eligible for a retail license? That at least seems to be something everyone agrees on.
That would make me feel better, because like I said, that was my original intent, was just cultivate, manufacture, and testing. And it'll make them more comfortable, too. I don't know where we would put that.
I'll figure it out.
Okay, yeah, that's probably editorial. Well, do we want to wait? We want to let you figure that out? We'll do this in February?
So you have a couple options. You can say, make this change, add that they can't have retail, and put it out for comment. Or you can say, we want to look at the language again before you put it out for comment, so make this change and bring it back in February. It's really up to you.
I trust you. That sound okay with everybody?
That's fine.
All right. Then all those in favor of sending this out as it will be amended to say that we wouldn't want them to apply for retail license. Everybody that's in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Jones in opposition, so it's 3-1. All right, where are we at on time? Okay. Then that brings us to number 13. Tab 13, which is fingerprints. Do you want to run the by us real quick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the statute at 1738-200 requires each applicant to submit fingerprints and fees. The interpretation of this has been that the applicant is the licensee, so that when an applicant, like an entity, applies for multiple licenses, we only collect one set of individuals for each, or one set of fingerprints for each individual. But if an individual is involved in multiple entities, as we kind of commonly see that if somebody is going to have a manufacturing, a cultivation, and a retail license, they'll often have one entity holding the cultivation and the manufacturing license and a different entity holding the retail license. And thus we have had to get fingerprints for the same person more than once, which is unnecessary. It's unnecessary for us. Fees, then we have to refund the fees. We have to keep track if we sent this card or not. It's unnecessary for the applicant to have to submit their fingerprints more than once. So this regulation, which Ms. Milks actually drafted and we worked on it together, is to clarify that we, for new and transfer licenses and ownership changes, that we only need the fingerprints from an individual once in a 12-month period. It doesn't relate to renewals. That felt too complicated to add into this section. If somebody is applying for 3 licenses under 3 different entities at the same time, we'll only need to collect their fingerprints once.
Okay, so no more inky fingers. Any questions on, let's get a motion.
Mr. Chair, I would motion to put out for public comment the amendments to 3 AAC 306.055A fingerprinting.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
This doesn't apply to renewals, but it does to transfer a license or ownership change. And so, and is it a calendar year or is it a year from when the first fingerprints were taken? And the reason I ask that is, somebody, turn in an application in December and then do a different one in January at a different year.
So no, it's 12 months from the date that we receive their criminal history report. So if they submit an application in December, they submit their fingerprints, we send them off to DPS, we get the information back from DPS, say January 15th. Any additional application they may submit from January 15th to the following January 14th, they wouldn't have to submit fingerprints.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, all those in favor of sending the amendments to 3AC? Good.
One more question.
Sure.
There was a change in the statute that lengthened the time to 5 years for the fingerprint card they didn't have to redo it on a renewal.
For renewal.
If somebody was applying and then buying a different business, they would still have to submit a new card for the new business.
Yes.
Okay. Just trying to figure out the various time frames here.
Yeah.
I may need a Gantt chart or something to try to figure this one out.
So 306055, which is about criminal information and records, has always been about new or transfer, and it doesn't address renewals at all. So we just felt it was going to be less complicated to leave renewals out of this and sort of treat them as a different animal.
Okay, anything else? All right, then all those in favor of sending 3AAC 306055A out for public comment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's 11:12. We take a break. We'll be back here at 11:30 to take up tab 14.